Tom was an elderly man who lived a very simple life in a quiet town, and he carried himself with calm ways that made people feel comfortable around him, and he always greeted everyone with a warm smile that showed the kindness he kept in his heart, and he believed that small acts of care could hold a strong meaning in the world, so he tried his best to help his neighbors whenever they needed support, and he never asked for anything in return, because he felt happy when others felt safe near him. One morning Tom left his small home with slow steps and a steady breath, and he walked toward the town hall because he had a request to make about a broken light in his street, and he wanted to fix it because many children passed through that road at night, and he wished to keep them safe from any harm, and he held the papers in his hands with gentle care as he entered the building, and joined the line of people waiting for their turn, and he stood with quiet patience as he watched others speak with the staff who worked at the front desk. Inside the hall the air felt a little tense because an officer named Dean had entered with a strong and loud presence, and people in the room stepped back slightly because he often spoke in a harsh tone that made others nervous, and even though he had the uniform of someone meant to keep peace, his behavior did not always reflect the peaceful role he should have respected, and Tom looked at him with neutral eyes and kept his calm nature because he believed that politeness could soften many moments in life. As the line moved little by little, Tom reached the front and presented his papers while explaining in a soft voice that the street light near his home had been broken for a week, and he kindly asked if the office could send someone to repair it soon because the children in the neighborhood often walked home after evening classes, and he worried about their safety, and he spoke with respect and clarity, making sure his request sounded simple and reasonable to understand. Dean walked toward the desk with quick steps, and he looked at Tom in a way that felt heavy with impatience, and he asked why Tom was taking so long, even though Tom had spoken in a short and clear manner from the beginning, and the people in the hall saw how Tom tried to stay calm as he explained again that he was simply reporting a broken light, and that he hoped to have it fixed as soon as possible for the safety of the young children on the street. Dean interrupted him with a sharp tone and accused him of slowing the line and wasting time, even though everyone in the room could see that Tom was respectful and patient, and tried his best to speak clearly, and the sound of Dean's voice rose louder than needed, which made people in the room feel uneasy, and Tom stood still and held his papers closely, but he did not raise his voice, and he kept his gentle manner, even as he felt a sting of worry. Dean stepped closer in a sudden movement, and with a fast, careless action he struck Tom across the face, and the sound of the slap echoed through the hall, and people gasped in shock, and Tom stumbled backward slightly, but he managed to keep his balance, and he touched his cheek slowly with shaking fingers as he tried to understand why this had happened, and he felt no anger in his chest, only confusion and sadness because he could not believe that his peaceful request had turned into such an unfair act. A young woman standing near the wall took out her phone and began recording because she could not let such behavior go unnoticed, and several others did the same because they wanted the truth to have evidence, and they knew that Tom had done nothing wrong, and they felt deeply for him because he was always a gentle part of their community, and he did not deserve such treatment from someone who should have been working to protect and serve the people around him. Tom looked straight without fear, and he did not shout or act unkindly even after being struck, and people admired his strength because he faced the moment with quiet dignity instead of anger, and Dean stepped back with a troubled expression as he realized others had recorded his action, but instead of apologizing he told Tom to leave the building and stop wasting time, and many people in the hall shook their heads in disbelief because they knew the truth, and they had seen the unfair behavior with their own eyes. Tom walked out of the town hall with careful steps, and he did not let his spirit break, even though his cheeks still hurt from the strike, and he held his papers tightly while he made his way home, and he reminded himself that kindness had value even in moments of injustice, and he believed that truth had its own strength, and he trusted that what happened today would not remain hidden because so many people had seen the unfair act and many had recorded it. Later that evening the video spread around the town, and people watched with concern and shock, and many reached out to Tom sending messages of support and offering help, and reporters came to his house asking for his side of the story, but Tom did not speak with anger. He simply explained that he had gone to request a streetlight repair, and that the situation had taken an unexpected turn, and he hoped that change would come from the truth now being revealed to the public. Tom's son Mark worked far away in another city, and he was part of an important agency that worked to protect citizens and uphold fairness, and when he received a message from a friend that included the video he felt a deep weight settle in his chest as he watched his father being treated unfairly, and he knew at once that he could not stay silent, and he understood that he needed to return home to stand beside his father and make sure that justice followed the truth. Mark packed his bag quickly and booked the earliest flight, and as he sat in the airport he replayed the video in his mind, and he thought of his father's gentle voice and kind ways, and he felt determined to protect him the same way his father had protected him all his life, and he knew that the next days would be important for his father, his town, and the truth. And so Mark began his journey home, ready to stand beside Tom, and ready to bring fairness into the light. The morning after the video spread across the town, Tom woke with a quiet heaviness in his chest, but he still carried his steady, calm nature that had guided him through many challenges in life, and he dressed slowly before stepping outside, where he found several neighbors waiting near his gate, and they greeted him with warm support and offered kind words that helped ease the weight he had been carrying since the incident, and Tom thanked them with a gentle voice because he believed that kindness deserved appreciation. A car soon arrived to take Tom to the courthouse for the first hearing of the case, and he sat in the vehicle with careful breaths while the driver spoke softly to reassure him that many people were standing with him and that the truth would be respected by the court, and Tom listened quietly and nodded because he had always believed that justice needed patience and honesty, and he intended to walk into the courthouse with dignity. When he reached the courthouse, he saw groups of people standing outside holding signs that supported fairness and accountability, and he heard whispers of sympathy as he walked past them, and many offered respectful nods because they admired his calm strength even after everything he had faced, and Tom felt a warm sense of community as he entered the building with slow and steady steps. Inside the courtroom, the judge prepared her papers while the lawyers arranged their files, and the audience filled the benches with anxious faces waiting to see how the day would unfold, and Tom sat beside his lawyer Lily, who had greeted him earlier with a gentle handshake and reassuring words, and she now leaned toward him and reminded him that he did not need to worry because she would speak for him with clarity and respect. Dean entered the courtroom moments later wearing a stiff expression that suggested a mix of worry and stubborn pride, and he avoided looking at Tom as he took his seat, and his lawyer whispered something to him in a low voice that tried to encourage confidence, but the tension in Dean's shoulders showed he was not as sure as he wanted others to think, and many people in the courtroom watched him closely with cautious eyes. The judge called the room to order, and the hearing began with Lily delivering a clear statement that described the event exactly as it had happened, and she explained how Tom had approached the desk politely and had made a simple request about a broken streetlight, and she highlighted how the video evidence revealed the sudden and unnecessary aggression that Tom had faced, and her voice carried a steady strength that filled the silent room. Dean's lawyer rose next and attempted to frame the incident as a misunderstanding, and he claimed that Dean had been under pressure and that his reaction had been a moment of poor judgment without intent to harm, and he insisted that Tom had spoken in a confusing manner which created tension and caused Dean to react, but his words felt thin against the solid truth shown in the video. Tom was then called to the stand, and he stood with slow, careful steps and sat with dignity as he answered questions from both lawyers and the judge, and he spoke with calm honesty about the moment in the town hall, and he did not speak with anger, nor did he exaggerate any part of the event, and his gentle truth moved many people in the room who admired how he handled the painful memory with grace. When Dean's lawyer questioned him, he tried to twist Tom's words and suggest that Tom had grown impatient and raised his voice, but Tom remained steady and replied with quiet clarity that he had spoken politely and had only wanted the streetlight to be fixed for the safety of the children, and the judge observed his calm manner with respect and appreciation. Then came a moment of silence as the judge asked if there was any family member of Tom who wished to speak, and before Tom could respond, the doors at the back of the courtroom opened slowly, and the sound of footsteps echoed across the room as a tall man in a dark suit walked forward with confident purpose, and many in the courtroom turned in their seats to see who had arrived. It was Mark, and he carried the calm authority of someone who had lived through serious work and had faced many difficult situations, and he walked down the aisle with steady steps that made the air in the room shift with quiet intensity, and Tom looked at him with surprise and relief because he had not expected his son to arrive so soon, and the judge raised her eyebrows in acknowledgement of the new presence. The judge asked the man to identify himself, and Mark spoke in a clear, calm voice that carried across the room, stating his name and his position in a federal agency, and the mention of his role brought murmurs among the crowd as they realized that Tom's son held a very important responsibility in his work, and this new presence changed the atmosphere entirely because people sensed that a strong voice had entered the case. Mark approached the front and stood beside his father, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder to show his support, and Tom closed his eyes for a brief moment to hold back the emotion rising in his chest, and the gesture brought quiet admiration from many watching because the bond between father and son stood strong in that simple moment. The judge allowed Mark to speak, and he began by explaining the character of his father, describing him as a man who had spent his entire life showing kindness to others and offering support whenever he could, and Mark spoke about how his father taught him to respect every person and to stand for the truth no matter how difficult the situation became, and his words were filled with honesty and deep care. Mark then described how he felt when he saw the video of his father being treated unfairly, and he spoke with calm control that carried strength rather than anger, and he explained that he did not come to the courtroom to create conflict, but to make sure that truth was respected and justice was served, and his presence alone spoke volumes because he represented fairness in his professional life. Dean shifted nervously in his seat, and for the first time his confident expression cracked as he realized the weight of what stood against him, and the courtroom grew even quieter as Mark continued to speak about the importance of accountability, and the responsibility carried by those who wore the uniform, and he reminded everyone that power must be used with respect and care. When Mark finished, the judge thanked him for his words and called for a short recess to review the statements and evidence, and during the break people gathered around Tom to show their support, while others whispered about how powerful Mark's presence had been in the courtroom, and Dean sat at his table with heavy tension across his face as he listened to his lawyer speak rapidly in his ear. Tom and Mark sat together in a quiet corner of the room, and Tom expressed how surprised and grateful he felt to see his son standing by his side, and Mark replied that he would always be there whenever his father needed him, and that no act of unfairness would go unanswered as long as he had the ability to stand for the truth. As the recess came to an end, everyone returned to their seats with renewed attention, and the judge prepared to continue the hearing with deeper focus now that she had heard from both sides, and from the witness who carried strong influence through his honesty and professional experience. The courtroom waited in heavy silence as the judge lifted her notes and prepared for the next steps that would shape the direction of the case, and Tom held his breath gently while Mark stood tall beside him ready to face whatever would follow. The courtroom grew quiet again as everyone settled into their seats, and the judge prepared to continue the hearing, and the air held a heavy tension that wrapped around each person like a slow-moving cloud, thick and full of expectation because the presence of Mark had changed the direction of the case, and everyone knew the next moments would hold great importance for Tom and for the truth that sat between both sides of the room. Tom sat with steady hands resting on his knees, and his eyes stayed soft even though his heart beat with anxious rhythm, and he glanced at Mark who stood beside him with calm confidence, and Mark offered a short nod of reassurance that helped Tom breathe easier because he knew that his son would protect the truth with care and strength, and together they waited for the judge to speak. The judge looked over the room, and then asked the court to bring forward the recordings that had been shared by several witnesses, and one by one the videos were shown on a large screen near the front of the room, and the audience watched in silence as the truth unfolded again in clear detail, showing how Tom had stood politely at the counter, and how Dean had reacted with unjust force, and the sound of the slap echoed again through the room, and many people lowered their heads with sadness. Dean shifted uncomfortably in his seat as the recordings continued to play, and his lawyer attempted to whisper guidance, but the tension around them made their words feel small and powerless compared to the weight of the evidence, and the judge watched each video carefully, her eyes never leaving the screen because she wanted to understand every moment with fairness and detail. When the videos ended, the judge asked if there were any additional witnesses who wished to speak, and several hands rose from the audience, and the judge called them one by one to the stand, and each witness described what they had seen in the town hall, and how Tom had done nothing wrong and had stayed respectful from the beginning to the end of the incident, and their voices were steady because they wanted the truth to be known clearly. One woman explained how she had seen Tom standing calmly in the line, and how he had spoken in a soft voice as he presented his papers, and she described how shocked she felt when Dean suddenly raised his voice and struck him, and she said she had never seen Tom act in a harmful way in the many years she had known him, and she wanted the court to understand that he was a gentle man who deserved fairness. A young man who had been near the door during the incident also took the stand, and he described how the tension rose when Dean entered the room and how Tom had kept his polite manner even when Dean spoke harshly, and he said that the act of striking Tom had no reason behind it and that it had been painful to watch, and he hoped the court would stand for the truth and protect people like Tom who relied on fairness in moments like these. Tom listened to each witness with gratitude in his heart, and he kept his eyes lowered because he did not want to draw attention to himself, but the kindness in the words spoken about him touched him deeply, and he felt thankful for the people who had chosen to speak even though they did not have to, and he knew their honesty would help the judge see the full picture of what had happened. The judge then turned to Dean and asked him to stand and explain his actions in his own words, and Dean rose slowly with stiff movements, and he took a deep breath before he began to speak, and he tried to explain that he had been tired and stressed that day, and that he thought Tom had spoken with impatience, but his words faltered as he saw the reactions in the room because many people watched him with skeptical eyes. Dean continued to speak, but the weight of the evidence made his words feel thin and unsteady, and he tried to shift blame, but each attempt fell short because nothing matched what the videos showed and nothing aligned with the calm truth that Tom and the witnesses had shared, and Dean's voice wavered more each time he tried to defend his actions until he finally fell silent and stared down at the floor. The judge asked Mark if he wished to respond to Dean's explanation, and Mark stood with quiet strength, and stepped forward, and he spoke with even tone that carried a strong sense of fairness, and he said that regardless of stress or long hours, the duty of someone in uniform was to act with patience and self-control, and he reminded the court that power must always be used with responsibility, and that the truth in this case showed a clear misuse of that responsibility. Mark explained that he had come not to seek punishment out of anger, but to ensure that no one else in the community would face unfair treatment at the hands of someone who should be serving them with integrity, and his words held a deep calm that touched many hearts, and even those who had been unsure earlier now felt the weight of what he said. The judge thanked him and then called for a short break before the final statements would be heard, and during this time Tom and Mark moved to a quiet corner of the hallway where they sat together and shared a few soft words, and Tom placed his hand on Mark's arm and said he felt grateful not only for Mark's presence but also for his calm and respectful way of defending the truth. People approached Tom in the hallway offering encouraging words and gentle smiles, and some even thanked Mark for standing up for his father, and Tom felt warmth grow in his chest because he saw how the community had come together to support him, and he realized that even though the experience had been painful, there was comfort in knowing that he was not alone. When the break ended, everyone returned to the courtroom, and the judge signaled for both lawyers to prepare their final statements, and the audience waited with focused eyes as the room settled into silence again, and there was an air of anticipation that wrapped around the space like a slow drift of wind waiting to reveal the next moment. Lily stepped forward first, and she delivered a clear and strong final statement reminding the court that Tom had shown respect and patience at every stage, and that the video evidence along with the witness testimonies proved without doubt that the act against him was unfair and unnecessary, and she said that justice was not only about the law but also about protecting the dignity of every citizen. Dean's lawyer stood next and tried once more to frame the situation as a misunderstanding, but his arguments lacked strength because the evidence had already cleared the truth, and even he seemed to sense the weakness in his words as he spoke, and his tone grew softer toward the end of his statement. The judge then announced that she would now take a short time to review the case before delivering her decision, and the courtroom grew quiet once again as she gathered her papers and stepped away to consider everything that had been said and shown. Tom closed his eyes and took a slow breath, and Mark remained at his side like a steady pillar, and both of them prepared themselves for whatever the judge would decide, knowing they had spoken the truth with calm strength. The courtroom held a deep silence as everyone waited for the judge to return and deliver the decision, and Tom sat with his hands folded together, while Mark remained beside him with calm strength, and the air felt heavy as if the walls themselves understood the importance of the moment, and people whispered in soft voices while glancing toward the door, where the judge would soon reappear and begin the final stage of the hearing. When the door opened at last, the whispers stopped as quickly as they had begun, and everyone straightened in their seats with quiet expectation, and the judge walked toward her bench with steady steps, carrying a folder of notes that held the truth of everything she had seen and heard since the hearing began, and her face remained calm and serious, which made the anticipation in the room grow even stronger, and Tom took a slow, careful breath as he prepared himself for whatever would come next. The judge opened the folder and reviewed her notes in silence for a moment before looking toward Lily, the lawyer who had stood by Tom with steady support throughout the case, and she then looked toward the lawyer beside Dean, who shifted nervously in his chair because the weight of the evidence had weakened his confidence, and the judge addressed both sides with a calm and firm voice, stating that she would hear their final brief words before giving her decision. Lily stepped forward with composed elegance in her posture and spoke with clear and respectful tone, and she reminded the court that the case was never built on anger but on truth and dignity, and she repeated that Tom had shown nothing but patience and respect during the incident, and that the video evidence along with the witness testimonies had shown beyond doubt that the action taken against him was unfair and unnecessary, and she emphasized the need for accountability to restore trust in the community. Once Lily finished, the judge looked toward Dean's lawyer, who rose slowly with a strained expression, and he attempted once more to describe the incident as a moment of confusion and pressure, and he tried to explain that Dean did not intend harm, but his words lacked strength because everything he said had already been measured against clear evidence, and the truth in the videos stood stronger than any attempt to soften the reality, and even he seemed to realize that the argument no longer carried weight. The judge then asked Dean to stand, and as he rose his shoulders tensed and his hands trembled slightly, and he tried to hold a steady face, but the pressure of the moment was too heavy for confidence, and he spoke in a low voice, admitting that the situation had escalated too quickly under his own poor judgment, and he said he felt regret for acting without patience, but the room remained silent because his words could not erase what had already happened, and the judge noted his statement without showing any visible change in her expression. Mark watched Dean with calm eyes that carried both strength and fairness, and he did not speak because the moment did not require additional words from him, and he simply remained steady as he stood beside his father, showing quiet support through his presence alone. And Tom looked at Dean with gentle sadness, rather than anger, because he did not desire harm but simply wanted the truth to be respected, and the judge observed this exchange with thoughtful expression. After hearing both sides, the judge closed the folder and let her hands rest upon it for a moment before speaking, and the room grew even quieter as people leaned forward slightly wanting to catch every word, and the judge explained that her decision was based on the evidence presented, the testimonies shared, and the need for fairness in every corner of the community, and she spoke with firm yet calm tone as she began to outline her conclusion. She stated that Tom had approached the town hall respectfully without causing any disruption, and that the evidence showed he had remained calm throughout the interaction, and she noted that Dean's reaction had no justifiable reason and had gone against the behavior expected from someone entrusted with authority, and she explained that the law required accountability when such actions were taken against an innocent citizen, and she paused for a moment as the weight of her words settled through the room. The judge announced that Dean would face disciplinary action and a formal record of misconduct, and she further stated that he would step away from his duties for a period of review under supervision, and that he would be required to complete training focused on communication responsibility and respect for the community. And many in the courtroom exhaled softly in relief because they felt that justice had been served in a manner that brought both accountability and a chance for improvement. Dean lowered his head upon hearing the decision, and his face reflected deep remorse and discomfort, and he knew he could not deny the truth any longer because everything had been shown plainly from start to finish. And Tom watched him with quiet eyes and nodded slightly because he believed in the possibility of growth even after mistakes, and he hoped that Dean would learn from this moment and become someone who would treat others with fairness moving forward. The judge then turned her attention to Tom and spoke with a softer tone, acknowledging his patience, his honesty, and the dignity he had shown throughout the entire process, and she said that his calm strength had reminded everyone in the room that gentleness could hold power, and she praised the way he handled himself in a difficult moment, and she said that the community should look upon him as an example of courage anchored in kindness. Tom felt warmth spread through his chest as he listened to her words, and he lowered his head respectfully in gratitude, and he felt a sense of peace settle inside him because he knew that truth had been protected, and that fairness had guided the decision. And Mark placed a steady hand on his father's shoulder, and gave a small reassuring squeeze that carried all the pride and love he held for him. As the judge dismissed the courtroom, many people stood and gathered around Tom, offering supportive words and gentle smiles, and some even reached out to shake his hand and thank him for standing strong. And Tom greeted each person with humble warmth and expressed his appreciation for their kindness, and the community spirit that had risen around him during this challenge touched him deeply and gave him renewed sense of belonging. Dean walked toward the exit with slow steps, accompanied by another officer, and his expression showed reflection rather than anger, and though the moment was heavy for him, it marked the beginning of a path on which he would need to rebuild his behavior and earn back the trust he had lost. And Mark watched him leave with calm eyes, not wishing him harm but hoping he would grow with sincerity from this experience. When the courtroom finally emptied, Tom stepped outside with Mark, and the sunlight touched his face with gentle warmth, as if the world itself recognized the weight that had been lifted from his shoulders. And people outside the courthouse clapped softly as he walked down the steps, and the kindness of their smiles brought comfort to his heart. And Mark guided him toward the car with careful steps, making sure his father felt supported every moment. As they drove away, Tom looked out the window and watched familiar buildings pass by, and he felt grateful that the truth had been honored and respected, and he felt even more grateful for his son's unwavering support and presence, and he knew that whatever happened next, they would face it with the same calm strength they carried today. When they reached home, Tom settled into his favorite chair with slow ease, and Mark prepared tea in the kitchen, and the peaceful quiet of the house wrapped around them like a warm blanket after a long storm. And Tom closed his eyes and allowed the calm to fill his heart, because he knew the hardest part of the struggle had passed, and he felt ready for whatever new chapter awaited tomorrow. The morning after the courtroom decision, the sunlight entered Tom's home through the soft curtains and created a warm, gentle glow across the living room, and Tom woke with a lighter heart than he had felt in many days. And he sat slowly at the edge of his bed and breathed in the calm air that reminded him that the long, stressful journey he had gone through was finally reaching a peaceful stage, and he felt grateful for the support around him and for the truth that had been respected in the end. As Tom walked into the kitchen, he found Mark already awake, preparing breakfast with simple care, and the smell of warm tea filled the room with comfort. And Tom smiled at the sight of his son, who had traveled far and stood by him with strong, steady courage. And Mark turned and greeted him with a gentle smile before placing a cup of tea on the table and inviting him to sit and enjoy the calm morning together. Tom thanked him and took a seat, and they sat in a peaceful silence for a moment, allowing the quiet warmth of the morning to settle around them, and Tom looked at Mark with soft eyes and said that he felt grateful for everything his son had done for him, and he said that he did not know how he would have faced the difficult days without the strength and protection that Mark had shown, and Mark listened quietly, and replied that he would always stand by his father because his father had always stood by him in every step of life. After breakfast, they spent some time in the living room talking about the upcoming days and how Tom could return to his normal routine without worry or fear, and Tom said he wished to visit the community center again because he missed the peaceful work he did there, and he missed seeing the children who always greeted him with bright smiles, and Mark agreed that returning to the community center would help bring his father back into the life he loved. Later that morning, a few neighbors arrived at the front gate holding a simple banner that read "We support Tom," and they greeted him with friendly warmth and said they wanted to check on him after the long hearing, and they praised his calm strength and the dignity he showed during the difficult days, and Tom thanked them with sincere gratitude because he had always believed that kindness was strongest when shared among neighbors and friends. As the neighbors left, Tom and Mark decided to take a slow walk down the street, and the gentle breeze brushed against their faces as they walked side by side, and Tom noticed how bright the repaired streetlight looked in the daytime, and he felt a quiet sense of satisfaction knowing that the concern he brought to the town hall had finally been addressed the right way, and that the children in the neighborhood could now walk home safely under its glow every evening. They continued walking toward the community center where a small group of children were playing outside, and when they saw Tom approaching they ran toward him with excitement, and greeted him with cheerful voices saying they had missed him, and that they had been hoping he would return soon, and Tom bent down slightly to greet them with warm smiles and gentle laughter that came from his heart, and the simple joy of the moment felt like a healing balm. Inside the community center, the staff greeted him warmly and said they had watched the hearing and were proud of how he handled himself, and they told him that the center was always open for him and that he was an important part of their small community, and Tom felt a warm wave of emotion because the center had always been a place where he felt connected and valued, and now more than ever he appreciated that sense of belonging. Meanwhile, Mark stepped outside to take a short call from his office, and when he returned he told Tom that his agency wanted him to stay in town for a few more days to complete a short community report related to training and accountability improvements, and he explained that the recent incident had brought attention to the importance of better communication between officers and citizens, and he said his role would help guide the town toward positive change. Tom nodded with understanding and felt proud of his son for using his skills to help create fairness and safety for the community, and he told Mark that he felt happy knowing that something good could grow from a difficult moment, and Mark agreed, saying that every challenge carried a chance for learning and improvement when faced with honesty and calm responsibility. As the afternoon passed, Tom and Mark spent time walking through the market area of the town where many shopkeepers greeted Tom kindly and said they were glad to see him out again, and some thanked Mark for standing by his father with respect and quiet strength, and Tom felt his heart warm as he saw how many people cared about him and how the truth had brought the community closer rather than apart. On their way home they walked through a small park where Tom often spent his mornings, and he felt comfort in seeing the familiar trees, the open field, and the quiet benches where he used to sit with peaceful thoughts, and he decided to stop for a moment to rest and appreciate the calm surroundings while Mark sat beside him, and together they watched children running through the grass, and their playful laughter filled the air with soft joy. Tom took a slow, gentle breath and said that even though the past days had been difficult, he felt stronger now because he had seen how truth could rise above unfairness and how kindness could guide people even when the path seemed heavy, and he said he hoped the town would continue to grow with fairness and understanding, and Mark agreed and said that calm strength could create powerful change when carried with sincerity. When the evening sun began to draw its warm colors across the sky, Tom and Mark returned home where the soft orange light touched the walls and created a peaceful glow in the living room, and Tom settled into his favorite chair while Mark prepared tea once more, and the familiar quiet of the home wrapped around them like a soft blanket, bringing comfort after a day full of gentle moments and renewed hope. Tom looked at his son and felt a deep appreciation for the bond they shared, and he said that he felt thankful for having a son who carried both strength and kindness in equal measure, and Mark smiled modestly and replied that these were qualities he learned from his father, who had shown him since childhood how to treat others with respect, patience, and understanding. As night approached, they sat together in calm silence, sipping their warm tea and watching the streetlight outside glow steadily in the evening air, and Tom felt at peace knowing that the light he had tried to have repaired for the safety of the children now stood strong and bright like a symbol of the fairness that had returned to his life and to the community. He reflected on the journey from the incident to the hearing and now to this quiet, peaceful moment, and he realized that even though the path had been difficult, it had led to something meaningful because the community had grown stronger and more aware, and his son had shown unwavering support that touched him deeply. In that quiet home under the steady glow of the streetlight, Tom knew that the storm had passed and a gentle new chapter had begun, and he felt grateful for every person who had stood by him, for every kind word that had guided him, and for the calm strength that had carried him through the challenge, and he knew that whatever happened next, he and Mark would face life together with the same courage and patience that guided them today.